What we're going to do is we're going to simplify radicals, and we're going to be stating the excluded values. So with the example that we have right here, we have x plus 2 over x squared minus x minus 6. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to factor it. So two numbers that multiply together give us negative 6, add up to negative 1 would be negative 3 and 2. After we do that, what we're going to do is we're going to find our excluded values. Excluded values is what gives us 0 for the denominator. And what gives us 0 for the first binomial is 3, and for the second one is negative 2. So these are the values that x cannot be. Otherwise, we're going to divide something by 0, which is not possible. After we find the excluded values, what we're going to do is we're going to cancel whatever they have in common. So we see the x plus 2's cancel, and our final answer is 1 over x minus 3. So with our first example, it's already factored for us, which makes it really nice. So we're going to find our excluded values. Once again, it's what gives us 0 in the denominator. So x cannot equal 7 or negative 3. That's our excluded values. Then what we're going to do is simplify it. Since it's factored, it's really easy. We have 3 over and then x plus 3. And so that's finding the excluded values and simplifying. Now for letter B, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to factor it. So I see the denominator has a 4 in common. So that means that I'm going to factor out a 4 in the denominator. And then I'm going to state my excluded values. So in this case, excluded values, x cannot equal 3. Then I'm going to simplify it. And what I notice is that the x minus 3's cancel. So I get 1 over 4. Now for letter C, what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor the denominator. And when I factor it, I get an x minus 6 and an x plus 6. And looking at this right here, this is a 6 minus x. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor out a negative 1. And then that gives me x minus 6 when I flip it around. So my excluded values, I'm looking for what gives me 0 in the denominator. And so x cannot equal, for the first one, 6, and for the second one, negative 6. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cancel. And so I could cancel the x minus 6's. And so I have negative 1 over, and then x plus 6. Now letter D. What I'm going to do is I'm going to factor both the top and the bottom. So the top, two numbers that multiply together give me 5 and add up to 6, be 5 and 1. And then for the denominator, I'm going to multiply the 2 and the 5. That gives me 10 on top, 11 on the bottom, so that would be 10 and 1. Because the leading coefficient is 2, I'm going to divide each of them by 2. And in the denominator, I'm going to get x plus 5, and I'm going to get 2x plus 1. So looking at this right here, when I state my excluded values is what gives me 0 in the denominator. So I'm looking at just my denominator. And for the first one, it would be negative 5. And for the second one, it would be negative 1/2. Now, simplifying it, I see that the x plus 5's cancel. So I have an x plus 1 over a 2x plus 1. Now, looking at letter E, this one's a little bit different. We see that they have a 2 in common, so we factor out the 2, and we get an x plus 7. For excluded value, the reason that this is different is because there's no variable in the denominator. So that means that there is no excluded value. We can still simplify it. The 2's cancel, and we just are left with x plus 7. Now, for letter F, we're going to factor the bottom. Since it's a trinomial, we're going to use the x method. Two numbers that multiply together give us 20, add up to negative 9. And that would be negative 4 and negative 5. So I have x minus 4 and I have x minus 5. When I'm looking at this, what I notice is that it's flipped. So I'm going to factor out a -1, and that gives me x minus 5. When I'm stating my excluded values, once again, it's what gives me 0 in the denominator. So x cannot equal 4 and 5. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cancel. So I have x minus 5's cancel, and my answer is -1 over x minus 4. Now, letter G. For the first one, I see that they have a 2x in common, and that leaves me with a 2x minus 3. In the denominator, I see it's a special factoring pattern, a difference of squares. So that would be 2x minus 3 and 2x plus 3. When I state my excluded values, I'm going to be a little lazy and just put x cannot equal plus or minus instead of both answers, and then 3/2. So there's the 3 and there's the half. I see that they both have a 2x minus 3 in common, so that gives me 2x and then 2x plus 3. Looking at letter H, they're both trinomials, so I'm going to factor using the x method. For the first one, two numbers that multiply together give me -4, add up to -3, so -4 and 1. So I have x minus 4 and x plus 1. In my denominator, I multiply the 3 and the 4, and that gives me a 12 on top and a 7 on the bottom, so that would be 4 and 3. I'm going to divide each of these by 3. And so that gives me 3x plus 4. And I have x plus 1. So once again, I'm going to look for my excluded values. It's only looking at the denominator. So when I look at the denominator, I have -4/3. And I have -1. Simplifying it, I see they both have an x plus 1 in common. So that gives me x minus 4 and 3x plus 4.